Hi everybody, how you doing? How are you doing? Hope everybody's healthy and well and safe. Hope you're taking all the precautions that you need to take during this time of the corona virus. And so tonight we're going to talk about, today, wherever you are, we're going to talk about 5 Derech Eretz lessons in the Torah portion, in the Parsha. As I mentioned before, have we done this, once or twice? I'm not sure. Whatever it was, whenever we've done it, I've mentioned that Derech Eretz is a way of being a mensch. From the Torah portions, we try to lift up 5 lessons about how to be a mensch. And I've mentioned before, mentioned before, great pun, thank you. I've mentioned before that this is not always easy to do because not every Torah portion has things that have a banner on it that say, okay, here's a Derech Eretz lesson. It doesn't happen that way. So sometimes I have to work hard, like this time, to find 5 lessons on how to be a mensch. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. We'll be here for about 30 minutes, God willing. I would like to dedicate tonight's learning session in the memory of somebody who passed away this morning, unfortunately. A great, great rabbi, well-known in most, certainly in Orthodox Jewish circles. His name is Rabbi Nachum Rabinovich. He was the head of the yeshiva that was down the street from us in Ma'ale Adumim. He was actually a down the street neighbor. So he passed away this morning at the ripe old age of 92. He was the president of Jews College in London for many years. He had a congregation, I think, in Charleston, South Carolina for a while, Montreal. Made Aliyah to Israel, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, something like that. Anyway, very well known, respected, bright, scholarly, gutsy, wrote many, many books, seminal books on Maimonides, Rambam, and unfortunately passed away this morning. It's a very, very sad announcement to make for those of you who might know him. If you've never heard of him, check on Google or Wikipedia, Rabbi Nachum, N-A-C-H-U-M, Rabinovich. Really, really a great, great man. I had him in the car a few times, just driving him to different places, just very, very pleasant. A mensch. He was a mensch. He modeled what it means to have Derech Eretz. So we dedicate this learning tonight to his dear and precious memory. Okay, do we have time left after all of that? Having said that, let's get to Torah lesson number 1, Derech Eretz today. This is the weekly portion of Emor. We're getting towards the end of the book of Leviticus. Here Leviticus. The book of Vayikra, we're getting towards the end. And this is called the portion of Emor. So here is Derech Eretz lesson number 1. And again, thank you all for being here today. Another blue shirt for Sharon Bear. So here's Derech Eretz lesson number 1. It says in the very beginning of the weekly portion of Emor, it says, it's going to introduce some laws to the Kohanim, those who served in the tabernacle in the desert, and those who served in the holy temples, the Kohen. They offered the sacrifices, etc. So here's what it says. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, God said to Moses, Emor el HaKohanim b'nei Aharon, say to the Kohanim, who are the Aaron and the children of Aaron, ve'amarta alehem, and tell them, etc., etc. So it says, Moses, say to the Kohanim, to the Kohens, and tell them. Well, a lot of the commentaries said that sounds like a little repetitious. Say and tell them. Just say is enough, or tell them is enough. Why do we need the say and tell them? So Rashi, the great commentator from France, here's what he had to say about it. He had to say that why does it say and tell them? The say is to the adult Kohens. And the tell them means the adult Kohens have to tell the younger Kohens. In other words, what's written in the Torah is not just for that Torah time. This tradition of what the Kohens do in the Holy Temple, and even in the absence of a Holy Temple like now that we've had for close to 2,000 years, whatever the Kohen is going to do is going to go through the end of the eras until the times of Mashiach, till the times of the Messiah. So say and tell them you say to the adult Kohanes, and they will tell who? Their children. This is what you need to do to the end of the generations for the next 3,300 plus years. So say and tell them. Say to the adults that they should tell the kids. Very nice. Rashi, the great commentator, says in his words, Lehazhir Gedolim al Kitanim, to warn the greater, which we would say as adults, to warn the greater regarding the Kitanim, regarding the smaller. Warn the greater regarding the smaller. Adults to the children. But there is another very beautiful lesson, which is a Derech Eretz lesson, which can mean that Gedolim are like the great people, and the Kitanim are what people would think of as the little people. I don't mean those who are vertically challenged. Little people means the ones that we don't think that often of. A sanitation worker compared to a CEO. He's a big person, and the sanitation worker is thought of in society as the little person. So what does it mean to warn the big regarding the little? The Derech Eretz lesson is that we become great. We become the great people by not ignoring the little people. We become great by paying them attention. For example, if you're in a restaurant, how much is the waiter or waitress making an hour? Not a whole lot. Even with tips, some places tend to pool the tips. It's almost not worth to be nice and bring another basket of bread or whatever. But most of the people in restaurants and other takeout, they have a little nameplate. Imagine how it would make their day to say, wow, thank you, Kathy. I really appreciate... Oh, I'm sorry, your name is Bob. Thank you, Bob, Kathy, whoever you are. I really appreciate your service. Somebody comes over to the table. By the way, Neil, do me a favor if I could just have another whatever. This is the greater, consider the lesser or the smaller. It's not that we have a right to say we're great and you're tiny, you're small, you're insignificant. It's just kind of the way society looks at people. So this is a Derech Eretz warning that we should be very, very careful to acknowledge the little people in society, the sanitation people, service people, waiters and waitresses. We can become big people by acknowledging the little people. So I'll give you an example. I heard this story. I don't know if it's true. If it's not, it should be. A group of people who were studying to become doctors, and these residents were told that there's going to be a big test coming up. So they need to study, brush up. It's going to be Thursday at 12. All the residents come into the room Thursday at 12, and the professor says to them, okay, here is the test, the big test before you can move on any further. The big test. So I'm going to pass out the sheet to you. Hope you've been studying. I'm going to pass out this test paper to you. I'm going to put it face down, and then at the count of 3, everybody to please put it face up, and then please answer what you need to answer. Okay, hands them all out. It's now 12 o'clock. Gives it out. 1, 2, 3. Everybody turns over their paper, and they are a little amazed. Because what's on the paper? There's only one question on this paper for the residents who are ready to graduate to become doctors. What is the one question? What is the first name of the woman who sweeps the floor? Nice. It's not a medical question, but the great need to recognize the little. And I think that's a very great lesson. It's a very great story. What's the name of the woman who sweeps the floor? That's also going to be important for you as a doctor, to recognize the, quote, the little people. So I think that's lesson number 1, Derech Eretz lesson. The big ought to recognize the so-called little people. Lesson number 2, and I'm just looking at many of the names. It's hard for me to shout out all of the names of the people who have just tuned in or sending a nice message. Hi, I'm watching. Very, very nice. I really, really appreciate it. The last lesson, 2 lessons that we've had over 200 views, which is an amazing thing, except when I think of the lady about 3 years ago who laughed her head off when she put on the Chewbacca mask. I'm sure some of you have seen that video. 3-4 minutes, she's cackling and laughing in her car because she put on the Chewbacca mask. I think the last time it had maybe 140 million views. So 200 views is also very, very lovely, and I appreciate it that you're here. And let's move on now to Derech Eretz lesson number 2. This is kind of a personal one, so I appreciate your indulgence. In chapter 16, verse 21, chapter 21, verse 16, it says that the Kohen, who's going to be the main functionary of the Holy Temple, the Kohen is not allowed to serve as his function. The Kohen had a high-profile job. The Kohen is not allowed to serve if they have any disqualifying blemishes. I'll take disqualifying blemishes for 400, please. So what is a disqualifying blemish? For example, the Torah mentions a Kohen who might be blind, a Kohen who might be lame, a Kohen who may have one limb longer than the other, a Kohen who may have a broken leg or a broken arm. A Kohen, I'm sorry that I laugh at this every year, so I'm going to try to restrain myself. A Kohen who has abnormally long eyebrows. Rashi, the great commentator, says, like Johnny Carson, how long is it? Rashi says they're disqualified if they're long enough to reach onto the cheeks. I mean, that's what do you say in Yiddish? That's a gesunte eyebrow, wouldn't you say? Anyway, so the Torah mentions these kinds of things. Somebody with a dry skin eruption. So there should be no blemished animals brought to the altar in the Holy Temple. And God requests that there are no blemished Kohanim, no blemished functionaries that should also not function in the Holy Temple. They shouldn't have the high-profile jobs. They can maybe have some of the lesser-profile jobs, but one gets the idea that either everything in the Holy Temple should be as perfect as possible, and the appearance of the functionary should be as perfect as possible, like every animal needs to be as perfect as possible. But, every time I read this, I say to myself, I think God would have had a greater message in all of this if he said, you know what? A blemished Kohen should actually be a functionary. You know why? Because the Kohen shouldn't think that we're hiding him because of his blemishes. Let people have a chance to react to the blemishes in a nice way. Let people be kind to the Kohen. Let people be nice to the Kohen. Let us not mistreat somebody who's got any kind of blemishes or whatever. It's not nice to kind of sideline them. No, put them up in the front. We'll give them the dignity, the honor, the respect they deserve. And that would, for me, thank God I'm not making the laws, because my law would have been totally the opposite of what the Torah law is. They can't function. Ilan Adler says they should function. Let's deal with people with blemishes, disabilities. Let's not hide them and put them behind some kind of a partition. No, put them out there so we know how to deal with it and give them the proper dignity and respect that they deserve. So to me, that would have been a better law. But thank God I was not at Mount Sinai, and nobody depended on me for 613 laws. So here's what I learned about this. Why is the Kohen sidelined because of all of these blemishes? So here's my take on it, and it comes from a very, very personal experience. When I was in the grades 7 and 8, I went to a public school in Providence, Rhode Island. If you're watching for Providence, or you will be, Nathan Bishop Junior High. That was the name of the school. I had two years at a public school. The rest were at a day school in Providence, Rhode Island, the Providence Hebrew Day School, now called the New England Academy of Torah. So why do I bring this up? I bring this up because when I was in public school, we had gym 3 times a week. Now, in the gym were activities that, how do I say this? There were activities that yours truly was not really good at. I was not good at many of the activities. Okay, let's climb this horse. Let's climb this rope all the way up to the ceiling. Forget it. That was not me. At that age, 7th and 8th grade, I was a kreplach. I was a matzo ball. Not too far away from it now. I'm just saying, I was like a lump in an outfit. And I hated going to gym. So what would my mother do of blessed memory? My mother would write notes. She would write notes every, whatever, the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever it was, the 3 times a week. Write a note to the nurse. Dear nurse, my son Ilan is not feeling well today. I would please like him excused from school. I would take it to the nurse, and she would say, okay, no problem. You can go to the homeroom, whatever. The next time the gym came around, another note from my mother. Please excuse my son Ilan. He has a fever. He's not feeling well. He has a mezuzah stuck in his left ear. Whatever. We came up with the most outrageous things, but reasonable, but outrageous. And my mother had to keep producing these beautiful and effective notes. Please don't let him go. He needs a gym excuse. So this is going on for a few weeks. One time, I go into the nurse with another note. She reads the note, and you know what she says? She says, Ilan, I think I'm going to give you a gym excuse for the next 3 months. The next 3 months. Do you know what that means? I don't have to keep on coming in with these notes for the next 3 months. So if I remember correctly, my mother, she should rest in peace, called the school, called the nurse and said, I really appreciate this. Why did you give him a 3-month gym excuse? I mean, thank you. Thank you. We really appreciate it. But why? And the nurse said, I also have a son who is not thin. Is a nice way to put it. I also have a son like that. And I think that he would also appreciate a 3-month gym excuse. I kind of got a sense of why your son wanted to be excused for gym each and every time. Wow. So now I kind of get an insight. I don't know if the rabbis mentioned this. I haven't seen it as rabbinical commentaries to this law, that no blemished Kohen is allowed to serve in the high-profile, high-functioning jobs. My personal feeling is that maybe God, maybe Hashem, wanted to take these people that everybody was going to look at them. Look at those eyebrows. Look at the this. Look at the that. And maybe God wanted to protect them. You don't have to be put in front of the people if you're going to be stared at. Better that you shouldn't be stared at and retain your dignity. I don't know. That's my kind of a take on it. So it's another big Derech Eretz lesson to help save people embarrassment. You figure out how to do that in your daily life with the people that you meet. How do we save them embarrassment? What words can we do? What things can we do to save people various kinds of embarrassment? So that's lesson number 2. Lesson number 3 today. How are we doing on time? Oh, not so bad. I have another 4 hours. So lesson number 3 today comes from the idea that in Israel, and maybe all across the world now for Jewish farmers, Jews who own farmland, the Torah says that when you reap the harvest of your land, you may not completely remove the 4 corners of your field, and you may not pick up gleanings of your harvest. What does that mean, drop sheaves? So let's say I was a farmer. Can you imagine that? I can't. Let's say I was a farmer and I had a big field, and I would not be able to plant. I could plant, but the corners of my field are, according to the Torah law, not mine. And you would say, what do you mean they're not mine? I see the property, the 4 corners of the square field. Of course they're mine. I'm going to plant, I'm going to reap, whatever. The Torah says, yes, they are yours technically, but really they belong to the poor. The poor have nowhere else to go. They're going to go from field to field, and they're going to glean from those 4 corners. So when they glean from those 4 corners, this is what you have to leave for them. This is their area. I know you think it's your area, but it's really for the poor. And not also that, but when you're walking through your field and you're picking up your sheaves, you're taking all the stuff, whatever you dropped along the way, the Torah says you have to leave that. Leave that for who? And the answer is you have to leave that for the poor. And also the Torah says for the proselyte, for the non-Jew who was either interested in conversion or the non-Jew who had already converted. But you have to leave it for the poor, the disadvantaged. They're going to come through the field. They don't know where else to go. They know that the Torah law protects their needs. So you have to leave the four corners of the field. You have to leave all the droppings, and that's what you need to do. And this law still applies today. I'm pretty sure it applies also outside the land of Israel for any farmer, especially if you know that poor people are going to come. Now, so what's the Derech Eretz lesson? I think that in and of itself is a beautiful Derech Eretz lesson. You think the whole thing is yours, but Hashem is protecting part of it for those who are needy. That's already a very lovely lesson. Our sages learned other lessons from this idea of leaving the corners, and not only that, but leaving the dropped sheaves or the dropped anything as you were collecting, as you were gleaning. So the rabbis kind of had interesting things to say. They said it's better not to hand to the needy, but it's better to let them take. So you say, well, let me take a nice comfortable chair in my field. When I see somebody needy, I'll go over to one of the sheaves and hand it to them. Here it is. Here it is. Have a nice day. Happy to help. Or you go over to the four corners. You'll set up a nice chair with an umbrella, maybe a little Mai Tai or something, which I'm not wearing today. And you'll say, oh, here's somebody. Let me go to the four corners and I'll hand them fruit. I'll hand them the wheat, whatever they need. And so one rabbi says, no, we learn from this that it's better not to hand things to the poor. It's better to just let them take it. I can tell you here in Israel, I'm sure it's in other Jewish communities as well. Here in Israel, there are organizations that give out on a Thursday or a Friday morning even over 1,000, 5,000 meals to the needy and the poor in Israel. Unfortunately, there are needy and poor in Israel. So what do? They don't ring the bell, bang, bang. Somebody comes to the door. Hi, here's your package. Here's your Shabbat package again. Have a nice day. We'll see you next week. They don't do that. What do? They go late at night, assuming that it's not anything in the box or container that needs refrigeration. They go late at night, very, very early in the morning. They leave something at the door. Maybe they ring the bell and run away. Get into the car. Or in other ways, they are anonymously delivering so that they don't need to give, and all that the poor or the disadvantaged need to do is to take. Caterers, sometimes they over-cater. There's a lot of food left. A lot of people didn't come for one reason or another. Like the virus, you expected 400 people and only 10 or 20 showed up. It's a lot of leftover food. What I think a good caterer, what do? They leave out all kinds of containers, styrofoam containers, plastic boxes, for those people who just want to take. They don't have to be poor to take, but what are they going to do with all those leftovers? So that's another way of letting people take without giving. One commentator says, you know what this whole lesson teaches me? It teaches me that if you're a host in your own home, don't compel people to eat anything. Now, in Jewish homes, this is a big hobby. This is almost a full-time job. Eat. How many people who are Jewish watching, how many of you remember this? SS mein Kind. That means in Yiddish, eat, my child. It was also probably the name of a ship. SS mein Kind. Here, eat, I'm full, eat, go ahead. The people are starving in, fill in the blank. And if I eat it, they won't be starving. But one commentator says, from this whole lesson, I learn that perhaps a host should not be compelling anybody to eat anything. Put the stuff in the middle like a buffet, let people take, and maybe that would be preferable to having people feel like they're forced to take if you actually put things on their plate. Just leave it in the middle and people will take whatever they like. So that's our Derech Eretz lesson number 3. Better to have people who are disadvantaged or poor, better have them to take rather than we have to give to their hand. Lesson number 4, I'm being sensitive to the time. Lesson number 4, the Torah says in chapter 23, verses 9 through 10, when you enter the land of Israel that I will give you, you will reap its harvest. We just talked a little bit about that. And then it says in Hebrew, V'haveitem et omer reshit kitzirchem. You shall bring a measure of an omer, that's called the omer, from your harvest. You shall bring a measure, an omer's measure, from your field to the holy temple. In later years, it was brought every day during the time between Passover and Shavuot, the feast of accepting the Torah. And this is what we do now. Today, in the Jewish community, we count the Omer. Tonight, here, it happens to be 28 days of the Omer. We count until 49, and the 50th day is Shavuot, or the feast of Pentecost, I think. How much does the Pentecost? I don't know. The price keeps going up. Anyway, so my question is, so you're bringing this Omer of barley, and the question is, hey, why is it that, why is it that we don't wait till all the crops, the barley is now, but all the crops are done, we've harvested, and then we should bring all of our sacrifices to the temple? And the answer is, lo and behold, barley is the crop that ripens first. It's the crop that ripens first. What's the message, the Derech Eretz message? As soon as you can thank, go ahead and thank right away. You just had a nice dinner with friends, go home, send a message. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Whatever it is, if you ask my secretaries over the last 25 years that I had in synagogues in America, in Baltimore, in Stamford, Connecticut, etc., you will ask them, what is the phrase you most often typed for Rabbi Adler? And you know what they would say to you? They would say to you, we most often typed the words, thank you. Most of my communications in 25 years were thanking people for this or for that. So thanking people, why the barley? It's the first crop that ripens. Go ahead right away. Go to the temple, say thank you to God for the blessing, the rain, whatever needed to happen to have this barley. Thank you, thank you, thank you. At various other intervals, we'll also bring things to the temple, thanking God for ripening those crops. But the very first one, don't take it out of your mind. Go right away to the temple and be thankful to God. I just want to mention before we hit our last Derech Eretz lesson for today, and again, thank you so much for joining us. When I read a book, which my wife will tell you is very infrequently, like I read a lot of Jewish books kind of thing, a lot of halakha, Jewish law books, but when I like a novel or something, when I read a book, what's the first thing I turn to? Not turn into. What's the first thing I turn to in that book? So you may say the table of contents. You probably turn to the back page to see who liked this book, all those kinds of approbations. Maybe you'll turn to the front flap and see what is this book about. I'll tell you the first place that I turn to in any book. You might have already guessed it. The acknowledgments. I want to see what the acknowledgments look like. I want to see how grateful and appreciative and thankful the author is for those that helped, assisted, aided in creating this book. And if I see like pages and pages, if I see the little people, remember in the beginning we talked about the little people? If I see the little people being thanked, I say to myself, I think I'm going to enjoy this book. The level of appreciation that an author has for the people that helped this book come into fruition, that gives me an indication. It's not the only indication, but for me, that gives me an indication that I feel good about reading a book by this author. If they're so thankful and so complete about their appreciation, I appreciate the author already, and I can't wait to get into the book. So, appreciation as soon as possible. Don't let it get away. Say thank you. Call, write, email, Zoom, text, Twitter, you name it. There's so many ways today that we can thank people almost immediately. So that's number 4. Last lesson today, Derech Eretz lesson number 5 is in chapter 24, verses 1 through 4. And it talks about the menorah. You're probably familiar with the shape of the menorah. It's right in front of the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. That's pretty much the only thing right now in front of the Knesset. But outside, before you go into the building, there is a 7-branch menorah, which they had then in the temple. And it was lit every night by the Kohen. It could be any Kohen, didn't have to be the high priest. The high priest needed to light it before Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, but no, any Kohen could light it. So the Torah says the following, I'll say it in English. Aaron, the high priest, shall arrange this menorah continually. On the pure menorah shall he arrange the lamps continually. So what does that mean? That means that Aaron has to, every day before it needs to be lit at night, every day Aaron or any other Kohen needs to go to each of the 7 spigots, the 7 tops of the 7 branches, where they would pour oil, a certain amount of oil, and any Kohen, before it's lit, sometime during the day, I guess, they would have to go clean out the hole from any ashes, any residue. You know what it's like when you light a candle, like a Shabbat candle, and after Shabbat is over, you go and it's dripped and it's oozing and whatever. So what did Aaron have to do? What was the commandment? The commandment was to go and arrange these lamps. What was done to arrange these lamps? They had to clear the ashes, as I mentioned. They had to wipe and buff and polish each tip of each of the branches. They had to arrange for new oil. They had to measure the oil. They had to clean it. I'm guessing this was not like a 3-minute job. Okay? So that's all the commandment is saying. Just to go and arrange it and prepare it to be lit. Interestingly enough, say the commentators, this does not say that he has to light it. All it says is he has to prepare it. Doesn't even say light, prepare it. Well, the truth of the matter is, in another place, it does give the commandment to light it. But here, the only commandment is to prepare it, to get it ready for use. So what's the Derech Eretz lesson? It's the last one we have time for, my dear friends, because it's the 5th one. I think the lesson here, which I learned from a wonderful video, short video by Rabbi Stephen Exler, who used to live in Baltimore, was at the Beth Tefillah congregation where I was. He is now the rabbi of the Bayit, beautiful synagogue in Riverdale, New York. He said, sometimes, maybe all the time, even the preparations for something are a mitzvah. This is all Aaron is asked to do, or any Kohen. Just get it ready. Get it ready. There's another commandment to light it, but this is only get it ready, prepare it. And sometimes, maybe all the time, just getting something ready to be used for a noble purpose is also the mitzvah. Just getting things ready. So I'll be telling the last couple of minutes. Every Friday afternoon or so, when it's time to light the candles right before Shabbat begins, my wife goes to the area where she's got her candles, and you know something? They're all there already. Gee, I wonder who put them there. That's right, me. She mentioned to me in the very early parts of our wedding, our marriage, that people do this, husbands do this, and I think for maybe twice in 24 years, all the other times, they've been there. May not have been home, whatever. So I get such a pleasure setting up her candlesticks. I set them up, prepare them for her to light, but I'm the one that sets them up. And I think that is a mitzvah. Getting something ready for other people, preparing things for other people right before they need to do it, making things easier for people. It doesn't snow here in Efrat. It doesn't snow much in Israel, if at all. Once in a while in Jerusalem, once in a while here in the Efrat Gush Etzion area, but basically there's no snow. But I remember back in the old days in America, would you imagine getting up once during a snowstorm, you have to say, oh, I got to go out and dust off the car, and somebody has done that for you? You don't know who it is, but it doesn't really matter, because now you don't have to do it. That's a way of preparing something, make something easier for other people to do. You're walking on the street and you know that there's an elderly person living in that house or that apartment. You see that the newspaper was just dropped on the sidewalk. What do? You just bring it up to their door, leave. You've prepared the way. You've made something a whole lot easier. When you go to a hospital room, this is the last thing I'll mention, you go to a hospital room, you see somebody is there, they're not that able or capable to get out of the bed, whatever. You try to bring things closer to them. Here's the box of tissues. Here's the tray table. Here's the waste paper basket. It's just making things easier. It's enabling for something bigger and better to happen. So that's, I think, a beautiful Derech Eretz message, and I think the other 4 were worthwhile and memorable. So, dear friends, just take a look at that. Google that name again, Rabbi Nachum Rabinovich, and you'll see the great, great giant of the Torah that died, unfortunately, this morning. May his memory be for a blessing. Thank you so much for joining us. I wish you all a great rest of the week, and join us again Monday night, 8:30, 1:30, for Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers. Wednesday night, 5 Derech Eretz lessons in the Torah portion. Thanks for being here. I appreciate all your comments. Try to get back to you if I can. Have a good day. Shalom, everybody.